Welcome to the Chatbot series. In this video, I'm going to show you three different chatbots. The first one is sitting on FastAPI, and the backend is also an API built on FastAPI. And this one, both is pretty much sitting on the FastAPI, the front end and backend. And the next one is the front end now replaced by the Next.js. We're still maintaining the same FastAPI backend API. And on this one, the front end is built with Streamlit, which is also a Python-based UI UX framework. And this is also connected to the FastAPI backend. And let's go to a diagram to see the architecture. All right, so basically, the first one is everything sitting on FastAPI, the front end using HTML and regular JS. And this backend API was created using Python and FastAPI. Here, the user talks to the FastAPI-based front end, which eventually talks to FastAPI backend, and the information travels to OpenAI. From here, the OpenAI sends an AI response, which comes the other way to the backend FastAPI to the front end and reaches the user, completing the chatbot circle. In the second one, we have completely replaced the front end with Streamlit version, but we're maintaining the FastAPI backend the same way. But in this case, for the first time, we are completely breaking the front end away from the backend. Similarly, in this case, and we're replacing the Streamlit front end with the Next.js front end, but maintaining the FastAPI backend. With all that being said, let's go check out if our chatbots are working. Let's start here. Let's ask, good morning. All right, look at that. We're getting an answer. Let's try the other one. And this time it's the Streamlit one, and we're still maintaining the same backend. Let's ask, who is Trump? Enter. And look at that, we're getting our answer back. And you may have noticed that the streaming actually happened in the backend first, and then we did it at the front end. I had to trick it to stream the data on the front end, like this. Twice I do. It's happening here first, and now we are seeing it. Now let's go to the next one. Now this time we have Next.js front end, and once again we're still maintaining the FastAPI backend. That's where our API is. Let's ask something. Who is Biden? Once again, you see streaming happened here, but all the data dropped at once. Here also, what I found out is that Next.js is not compatible with FastAPI runtime. That's why no matter how hard I try to make the streaming data work here, but it didn't work for me. That's why always it does like this. Right, white sky is blue. The data is coming, and then once finished, it is dropped at once. But not to worry, I made the streaming possible in a different way. When I used a different backend, same FastAPI based, but it was LangServe. When I used LangServe, I made it work. But using directly FastAPI, I couldn't make it work. If some of you are capable of doing it, please let me know how you did it. I'll be very interested. But until then, let's go to the code one by one. We're going to start here first. Check out the backend, Python-based API. Then we're going to cover the HTML and JS-based FastAPI front end. From there, we're going to go to the Streamlit. In the end, we're going to cover the Next.js front end. All that said, let's get started. All right, so this is my FastAPI setup, both front end and the backend. You can see here, it's an app folder. Underneath that, there's API services, etc. but I kept this empty because this is a really small one, so we didn't need all that. So here under templates, you see the index.html. That's what this one denotes, the home page. And then we have the main.py, and this is where everything is happening. First, all the imports, FastAPI request, streaming response, Jinja 2 template, and HTML response. These are for the home page. And then, of course, OpenAI. And the rest are for logging and pulling up the .env variable. As you can see here, load.env. OpenAI key is being pulled in to instantiate this OpenAI object. And then we're setting up the FastAPI, setting up the template with Jinja 2 template. And in here, we're setting up the logging. And logging is basically responsible for all this information, the info you see at the backend. Keep track of everything. And here is our first route, app.get/. And this is our home route. And this is where we're pulling in the main template from this folder right here, index.html, sending the request. And we'll get into this index.html details a little bit later, which is responsible for this home page right here. And this is the final and the most important route, app.post. We're using the post method here, and our API route will be /chat. This is where all our front ends are going to make the request, and it's going to receive the request as a JSON and extract that input, the user prompt, as the user input variable. And right here, we're setting up the chat log. This is what is responsible for these messages, the user message versus AI message, AI response. You can see role system, role user, using a prompt by telling it you're a helpful assistant. Try to keep your answers short, max 3 lines so that it doesn't talk too much. And right here, we're finally contacting the API, the OpenAI API, using GPT-4o model, feeding the chat log, so all the data goes there, temperature maintained to 6, and stream equals true, so that all the data is streamed to us. As you can see right here, all the data can stream to us. And this is where we're actually creating a generator, which actually is responsible for streaming the output right here. As you can see, if we say, good morning, send the message, and immediately it just streams the answer. And that's because of this guy right here. And this is what we are returning, streaming response generate. This is the method. And our media type is text/event stream. Now let's look at our front end, index.html. This is basically pretty simple. It's I'm just pulling in the Bootstrap for styling and some extra styling right here using CSS. And this is just a few basic HTML to create the forms, the display area, and the input. And this is the JavaScript that makes those happen. Nothing fancy here, pretty simple. And I did not want to spend too much time making it look, streaming or whatever, because this is not something I will ever use again. This is just for this video and just as a proof of concept that it can be done. So this is all there is to it. And that actually finishes our FastAPI front end. Now let's move to the Streamlit version. All right, so this is our Streamlit version, and let's try it out. Good morning. And we get our message. So let's see how it's done. Right here, this file is the one responsible for loading up the necessary imports. And right here, using the load.env to get the OpenAI key from our .env file. And here we are giving it the API URL, localhost 8000/cat. This is the one we created at the backend, as you remember, right here. This is the FastAPI backend, and right here we have our /chat endpoint. Now let's go back. All right, so now we are going to go ahead and make a call to that. I'm declaring the first asynchronous function, fetch data, and we're sending the prompt from the user. And here I'm using the HTTPX Python library to create an asynchronous client. And this client, and using this client.stream, we're sending this post request and as a JSON object, the user input as prompt. Right here, we're handling the streaming response. Normally, just by using this, we should be able to display a streaming text on the browser. But in my experience, the moment we bring in a request using a third-party API to Streamlit, it just stops working. For that, I had to create another synchronous function, getting data from here and then passing it along to this synchronous function and then making it to look like a stream. Right here, we're creating a generator and giving it a sleep time of 5 milliseconds so that it looks like a stream. We first get it total data, even though it's streaming, but it doesn't work. It only works with Streamlit when we are making the direct call to OpenAI. For example, in here, I managed to successfully stream the data without problem. But the thing was, in the same Streamlit file, we had to make the call straight to OpenAI right here. We did not go any via media, not from a third-party API. But in here, we actually had to make the call to the third-party API. So when that happens, as you can see here, let's ask a big question. What is the French Revolution? Hit enter, and watch. Streaming happens here first, and then after it is done, and that's when this streaming on the front end happens, not at the same time. So I don't know why this is the way, but me personally, I couldn't make it work. So if anyone out there can, please let me know. I would love to learn from you. But other than that, this is where we initialize the chat log to the session state variable as message or messages. And from this point on, the Streamlit UI starts. As you can see, the title and the subheader. The title and the subheader. And here we are displaying the existing chat log as a markdown with message content. And this is where we take the input variable as a user role, and the content would be the prompt. Basically, this is the guy here. This is the U that you see there. And right here, I'm setting the user prompt, whatever the user puts in. And this is where, in a markdown version, we see it on the browser. And here we are creating the placeholder assistant response, setting it initially to empty, and a variable for the response text also set to empty. And this is where we are going to use a spinner while we wait for the response. And once the response starts coming in, using stream FastAPI response is this method right here. Stream FastAPI response, taking in the prompt and sending us a generator. And as the answer comes in chunks, we append it to the response text, and eventually we take this response text and fill up the message placeholder as markdown text. And this is where we finalize the response, use this .strip method to clean up the response text from any extra empty spaces. And at the very, very end, this is where we append the response to our chat log. That way, we can maintain a whole history of the chat. And this chat log is appended to the session state variable as message. And this is something we declared all the way up right here. This is where we initialized our session state. And that being said, we have seen how our Streamlit front end works. Now let's move on to the Next.js version. All right, so this is our Next.js front end. So let's try it one more time. Who is Hitler? And we get our answer. Fortunately, the streaming did not work because, according to my research, Next.js does not support the FastAPI runtime. But using another tool called LangServe, I managed to do this. That's why I didn't put too much effort onto figuring out how I can make the streaming work. Because from this point on, I'm going to be using LangServe mostly, and I'm going to create another set of videos for that. So that being said, let's go to the code. All right, so this is the Next.js backend, which is under Pages, under API chat.ts. This is where we're making the call to the FastAPI. This is the usual Next.js backend. As you know, this is a full stack framework. So right here we have request and response, and the prompt as request.body. And this is where the URL is set for our FastAPI backend, sending a post message, sending a post request as application/JSON. And in the body, we are including our user input as prompt. Right here, we're setting out some of the headers that are necessary. And in here, we are trying to receive our backend response in chunks. And once done, we're ending it with rest.end. And this is how we are handling the error response. And the main reason I say we're trying to handle the chunks because Next.js is not ready to handle the FastAPI runtime yet. And that is why it receives the whole answer first and then passes it along. And since this is under Pages API chat, so from our front-end component right here, which is responsible for the entire UI UX, right here, we are making the call to /API/chat. Now, in case you're wondering why we are using two different files, mainly because by using a backend separately to make the call, we get to avoid any sort of CORS issue, cross-site scripting problems. And at the same time, we keep our modules separate, maintaining the separation of concern. And at the same time, we get to enhance our security a little bit by keeping the actual endpoints separate from the browser. So here, it's going to look like we are making the call locally here, API chat, but in reality, we are actually making the call here. There could be sensitive information like where your backend is, it could be an IP here, etc., etc. So we get to avoid that by keeping this part on the server end. So right here, it's pretty simple. We just on submit, we just make the call to this Next.js backend /API/chat, the usual call. This is where we pass along the user input, and here are some error handling. And right here, we take the response using the get reader, and using the text decoder, we convert that streaming message into a regular text. We're declaring the AI response as we're initializing the AI response as an empty string, and then we just run it through a loop of while true. As long as the streaming is happening, we just keep taking the chunks and passing it along, and eventually use the set chat message state variable, which we declared up here. And this is where our data structure is user, it's true, then it's a user input. Otherwise, it's going to be just empty text, and this is what we're going to fill up with our AI response. And that's exactly what we're doing right here. And once this happens, we go all the way to our chat message component, and that's where we actually send the necessary data, the user, whether it's a user or not, this Boolean variable. And the message.text, and we also have a spinner, and that's what happens here as we pose a question, simple as good morning. Spinner spins, data comes in, displays. That being said, we just finished explaining 3 different chatbots, one using the FastAPI frontend and FastAPI backend, the other one respectively Streamlit and Next.js. Thanks for watching.